If you're a Texas teacher, you've probably been told your TRS pension has you covered in retirement. But is that the whole story? I'm here with Tucker Watkins, CFP, a financial advisor with 35 years of experience. Tucker, can you walk us through exactly how a TRS pension actually works?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Let me first say that I love teachers. My life has been richly blessed by some wonderful teachers, some of whom I still remember from elementary school and middle school. So I'm a firm believer in the power of education. My role is to educate educators. And so here, as a Texas resident, the Texas retirement system actually covers the pensions for over 1,500,000 wonderful teachers.
Tell me about a TRS, why it matters, and walk me through a formula so we can better understand this.
Sure. So the formula will be a little bit different based upon which of the six tiers an individual is, whether they're a teacher or a staff member or other employee covered by a Texas retirement system. So there's six different tiers. Fundamentally, though, there is one really important rule. It's what's called the rule of 80. Now, the rule of 80 means that when you take the number of years of service plus your age, you add those two numbers together, and as long as they're above the number 80, then you'll be good to go. Now, typically, most teachers hit the rule of 80 at around age 58 to 60. Career changers usually need more years, so they're usually able to retire around 62 to 65 years of age. Then beyond that, once they reach the age, or the rule of 80, that is, once they reach the rule of 80, then there's a formula. So I'm going to walk you through a tier one illustration. So in a tier one illustration, let's say that we have a teacher who started or another employee covered under TRS started at age 25 in 1986. Then after 40 years, that person would be 65 years of age. And I'll just say she because most teachers are female, but she would qualify then for the rule of 80. Here's why. Since her years of service plus her age exceeds 80. So in other words, 40 years plus 65 equals 105, and 105 is over 80, obviously. So that person would qualify. And then what they do is they take the three highest annual salaries and they average them together. So for purposes of illustration, I'll use the number $65,000. Then the pension math would look like this. You would take the total years of service times 2.3%, and then that would equal 40 times 0.023. That equals 0.92. And I know this gets kind of complicated in the weeds, but I'm just trying to do an illustration. So then the average annuity would be 0.92 times 65,000, which is $58,800 a year. So in other words, the bottom line is this, that the pension is very secure. However, it will be lower than the person is used to earning. And of course, like all pensions, it will be taxable. So a couple of things. One is the rule of 80, which is the age plus years of service has to be met. So the rule of 80 has to be met first. Then as far as which tier the person is in, they would have to just let me know. If they know, they could tell me, or they could just tell me the year that they started in service and their age, and then I can help them determine which tier they're in.
Okay, so that's, is there a monthly number that a teacher can expect?
Well, in this case, if we were to say monthly, I would just take the illustration I just did and divide by 12. So in this case, if they were used to making $65,000 a year, and if they met the criteria I just did in the illustration, then their income would go down to $4,983 per month.
Okay, so that changes. Okay, now if a teacher passes away, what does their spouse get?
Yeah, good question. There is what's called a joint annuity. And sadly, my father passed away at the young age of 57. Fortunately, he had selected that pension option. So when he did die, my mom got some pension, although it was lower than his pension would have been if he had survived and done a full pension himself. So yeah, so when a person retires under TRS, that person can check off a box on the form as far as how they want their pension to be. It could either be full or it could be joint annuity. So the joint annuity again will be lower. So sometimes that creates a gap. So there is a way that if the person is healthy, they can bridge that gap by buying life insurance to protect their spouse. Then with that, that's what's called a pension maximization. Then they can maximize their pension because the life insurance is in place to protect the spouse. So that's one way that the gap can be bridged. The other way that the gap can be bridged is that the Texas retirement system also allows, in addition to this pension, it allows for a person to set aside money on a pre-tax basis through payroll deduction so that each pay period, some amount of money would go into something known as a 403B. A 403B is very similar to what people have in the private sector known as a 401k. The similarity is that it's a payroll deduction, so the money goes in pre-tax, it grows completely tax deferred, and then eventually when the person's retired, of course, when it comes out, it would be coming out taxable, just as it would if it came out from an IRA or a 401k. So those are the two ways that the gap can be bridged. One is through life insurance, which allows them for pension maximization, where they can take the full pension because they've protected the spouse with life insurance. Of course, they would medically need to qualify. And then the other method of bridging the gap is with a 403B. So those are the two methods to bridge the gap. Typically, I will find the gap for sure because when I ask the people, my TRS clients, is that pension going to be enough to live on? In most cases, they say no. The other thing I'll mention is that if the work in the TRS system is a second career to where they might already have contributed money into a Social Security pension, what a lot of people are surprised to hear is that based upon their years of service in TRS, the amount of Social Security might actually be reduced. So they would not get full Social Security. So they become, possible triple whammies. One whammy might be inflation, one whammy might be not having enough pension income, one whammy might be having Social Security income be reduced. So for all of these reasons, I just really encourage everybody listening to give me a shout out. Let's get on the calendar and see how I can be of service for you in providing education about your benefits and looking at ways to bridge that gap.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty big gap that I don't think a lot of people really see this coming. So let's talk
Yeah.
a little bit more about inflation. So a fixed pension 20 years from now, is it worth the same as it is today?
Yeah, inflation is out there. It's a silent thief. And what it does is it reduces purchasing power. So for me, I was born in 1953. In 1953, the cost of 1 ounce of postage was 3 pennies. Now it's 78 cents. So a dollar doesn't buy what it used to buy, that is for sure. So we need then to look at projections of what the pension could look like for each TRS employee, what the gap would be, and how can we bridge that gap. So this is where I use some analytical tools in the process to look at their retirement analyzer and look at where will they be in the future and ask the question, is that enough? Typically, it's not going to be enough. Typically, we need to bridge the gap, as I mentioned, either with a 403B, where they can invest a little bit each money on a payroll deduction formula where each pay period, a certain amount goes into the 403B. I recommend using what's called a fixed index annuity, where my clients would have the upside connected to the performance of the S&P 500 with no downside, because the company that stands behind the 403B would guarantee the floor. So they get an upside connected to the performance of the S&P 500 to a cap with no downside risk. So that's one way to bridge the gap. The other way to bridge the gap, as I mentioned, is with what's called permanent life insurance. It could be either whole life insurance or index universal life insurance if the person is medically able to qualify for it, because they do have to qualify. So those are two ways that we can bridge the gap.
So when you look at all of this together, how do you think about TRS as part of someone's overall retirement picture?
Yes, I would say it's an excellent foundation. I'm thrilled that it's in place to protect all of our wonderful people, all the teachers and all the staff, all 1.5 million people covered under the Texas retirement system. It's an awesome foundation. However, it is just a foundation. What my job is as an educator to the educators is to provide a clear and transparent understanding about what the benefits will be, looking at how can we bridge the gaps, and that's my role, and it's my responsibility. But it's also a joy because I love to teach people and I love to educate the educators. One of the very unique characteristics of this thing that I mentioned called the 403B is that there's actually ways that a person can borrow against the 403B without having to pay taxes. And that can be there as a cushion for emergencies. And it could also be for opportunities that I would have to explain longer in a longer form video. But that is a true blessing that people in the private sector, in the world of 401ks and IRAs, don't have, because you can't borrow from a 401k, you can't borrow from an IRA. And so this opportunity then to be able to borrow from a 403B gives my clients, members of the TRS system, an opportunity to build a layer of money to fill in the gap and also to be there for emergencies or opportunities.
Yeah, I love in the notes that you gave me, you said TRS is a foundation, it's not a finished house.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
the frame. Yeah, I love that. So if any of this has surprised you, you're 100% not alone. Most teachers haven't looked at these numbers this closely before. So in the next video in this playlist, it's going to help you figure out exactly which TRS tier that you're in and what your pension will actually pay. So stay right here in the playlist. And if you're ready to talk to Tucker now, go ahead and click the link in the description. You can book a free 30-minute call with him. Find out more at tuckerwatkins.net.